Welcome to part B of lab 2. So for this lab we need to do, we're going to need a tool on Excel. So we need to get that tool first. So before we even begin dealing with trying to make a histogram of all of these different basketball salaries, we need to get the tool pack. So I'm going to show you how to do that just to get started. Alright, you're going to go to File, and once you've gone to File, you're going to go to Options. And once you've gone to Options, you're going to go to Add-ins. And at Add-ins, you're going to hit Analysis Tool Pack. And then it's key that you hit this. Hit Go. And when you hit Go, you still need to click that and get a little check mark and then hit OK. And when you do that, one should pop up. So if I go to Data, right at Data, I see a Data Analysis Tool Pack. Again, to get the Data Analysis Tool Pack, here are the steps. File, Options, Add-ins, Tool Pack, Go, Click, Tool Pack. Alright, so now we're ready to actually do this lab. So the first thing it says is just format the data. So I'm going to just quickly add in, insert a row up here and call that salaries of basketball players. Alright, so I'm going to call it salaries of basketball players and merge that across. What I'm trying to do is just make my data look nice and easy for me to read. Now I get these weird scientific notation numbers here, so I can't quite see what's going on, so I'm just going to double click that out. It's a little wider than I need, so I might shrink it in a little bit. And then I'll just do different coloring for all the different parts. I usually sort of have a color theme that I use as I do this, just so that it kind of goes together and looks a little bit nice. Alright, so, well, I guess good enough, alright? So now we're ready to actually make the histogram. I actually would like a little space between these two things, so I'm going to move that out. This does not need to have any color in it. Okay, so now let's start making our histogram. If I look over here at the directions, it does say to sort salary by from lowest to highest. So I'm just going to do what I've done before. I'm going to highlight all the data and put in a quick filter for myself. Right? One reason I actually highlighted it instead of just doing the Shift-Control-L is that when I have a title on it, it will highlight the whole thing and mess it up. So if I am going to have a title over my entire data set, I actually need to highlight it to put in the filters. The other option is just not to have a title up there. Okay, anyway, I'm going to go salary, smallest to largest, so you can see who has the lowest salary right there. And now we're ready for part 2, make a histogram of the data. So to make a histogram, I've got all the steps written right over here, okay, and I'm just going to follow them in this area. So first, to find my bin range, which is really important for histogram, is I need to do this equation, the max min. So I need to actually find the max. So I'm just going to do equals max and highlight all of this. And do the same for min, equals min, and highlight all of that. So now I've got to find the bin range. And what that is when you're looking at data and trying to figure out what it looks like, I want to kind of figure out how many people fall into a certain category, like how many people make $0 to $500, how many people make $500 to $1,000. That's what I'm trying to find. And that $0 to $500 or 0 to 50,000, whatever that is my bin range. So to the equation for that is equals, and I just do max minus the min over the number of bins. Now often when you're doing it by hand, we just do 5 bins, but since we're not doing it by hand, sometimes you can see more subtleties if you have bigger bins. So we're going to go with 10 this time. Alright, now that number is pretty funky, so I think I'm going to actually round it. So now you want to find the rounded bin. So we're on step 2. We want it to be a multiple of 5 or 10, or in this case, when you have an enormous number, it might need to be a little bit bigger. To really see this number, I'm actually going to put in some commas. Okay, so now I can see how big that number is. It's in the millions. So I'm probably going to want to round it off maybe to the 100,000th, so going about 5 digits backwards. So to do this, I'm going to use a new skill, which is to round down. If we look at our skills for this lab, at the bottom here, round down, this allows us to round to a number at a specific place value. Funny enough, we're actually going to use negative numbers to kind of go backwards to that place value we want. So if we head over to here, I'm going to do equals round down right right there. I think it's easier to work with if we just open up that function box, okay? So the number that I want to round down is this one, all right? And I'm going to go back about 5 digits. So I'm going to put a -5 in there. And now I've got a nice rounded number to work with. All right, now I'm ready for step 3, to list the bins, okay? So to list the bins for cell 1, you do a rounded min. So you can see I've added this little rounded min place. So what I need to do is I need to start with my minimum or slightly below my minimum value. So the minimum is right here, okay? I want to round that off as well. So I'm going to do another round down because I want to be below or at the minimum. I'm going to click on that. This time I might not go back 5 because then it would just disappear. So I'm just going to round over back about 4, so -4. There we go. Alright, so now I've got to start with my bins. So for our first bin, I'm going to actually put in our rounded min. So I'd hit equals and I just click that. Now I want that rounded min to stay there, so I'm going to need to do a new skill. Okay, so that it doesn't kind of change if I move things around. So I'm going to show you what I'm going to need to do. We need to do something called absolute referencing. So if we look at our skill list over here, we have absolute reference, which is an F4. And what that does is that when I decide to autofill, it will make sure that the cells that I cited stay exactly the same. All right? So what I'll do. So absolute referencing is a little hard to wrap your head around, but basically sometimes you can autofill. Like for example, say I autofill down. When I autofill down, I know you see all these zeros, but it's because this was referenced as E7, and when I go down, if you look up here, you can see this is referenced as E8, and if I go down one more, this is referenced as E9. So it's kind of following these empty cells down here, so it gets zeros. The important thing to realize is that as I go down, it's going to go from E10, and then to E11. So the number just keeps going down. I sometimes want to autofill and not have that happen. So if I don't want it to happen, what I'm going to do is if I just step here and click F4, with my cursor in front, if I click F4, I automatically get these dollar signs, and then it will hold it. So watch what happens now if I go down. See how it's all 3,000? So no matter which one I click on, you can still, it's still E7. So that is what it will do for me. All right, so that's why I want to do absolute referencing. I want to hold it. So again, you can either manually put in your dollar signs, or you can just hit F4, and that will do it for you. That's our first step. All right, so over on step 3, we've done cell 1 of our bins. Now we're going to go to cell 2, the equation. So the next equation, so this means that it will capture everything from this number and above and stop when it hits the value of the next bin. So the next bin, we're counting by this 2,400,000. So it's just going to be equal to the first bin plus that rounded bin number. Now this, again, when I autofill, I don't want it to change. I want this to always be the value. This is what I'm counting by. So I need to, again, do that F4 key or manually put in those dollar signs so that it will not change. All right, so now I know the first bin is going to capture all players who make between 30,000 and 2,430,000. This I just find hard to read with those two little zeros there, so I'm just going to come up here and get rid of those. And I am now ready to autofill. Now I'm going to autofill, if you see right here, I'm going to autofill until I see the highest value or above. So my maximum value, I want to stop when I hit my maximum values up here. This is again hard for me to read as it is. I'm going to put commas in. Okay, now I can see I'm stopping when I get to or above 25 million. So here I go. Getting going. Not there yet. Not there yet. All right, I changed this a little so you can see something, which is I have a little problem going on, which is that I can't see these numbers. See that little number thing? What that means is that this column is too narrow. So I'm going to just come up right here, get that double arrow up here, double click. Okay, now I can see things. And now I'm just going to keep on autofilling until I get to what I want. Still not at 25. Made it a little above the max, so I can stop now. All right, so I've got all the bins. I followed through step 1, 2, 3. I'm ready for 4. We already did. We got that analysis tool pack, so now we're actually ready to make the histogram. So to make the histogram, I'm going to make a little bit of room here. Okay, just over, because I want to put it right next to my stuff here. And I'm going to head over to data. And then I'm going to go to Data Analysis Toolpack. I'm going to actually have histogram already highlighted. I'm going to say OK. And now I've got to first highlight my input range. Now input, this is so key. What we are inputting is our actual data. Our data is numeric. That is what we are graphing. We're not graphing people's names. So it's key that you remember this. You go right up to there. I'm going to Control Shift down, highlight all of the data. It doesn't seem to be highlighting, so I'm just going to manually do it. This is sort of a pain, but we'll get it all down there. Okay. So I've got all of that. For my bin range, I'm going to actually highlight all the bins I just made. I am then going to make sure I have a chart output so that it actually gives me a graph. And I need a place to put, so what it's actually going to give me is a frequency table. So I want an output range. So I'm going to click right here. So I highlighted this so that this knows that I'm looking for my output range. I'm right here, and I'm going to look for an open space. So I'm going to do it kind of right next to where my bins are. Right here I should see it. So everything is here. Data, the bins, where I want it to come out. I have my chart. 4 things should be taken care of. Okay. And there it is. Here is my histogram. And here is my output table. All right, now it's time to make some modifications so this looks a little bit better. First things, I don't need this word frequency here. This is only showing one thing, so I do not need a key. So I highlight that and hit delete. This is a histogram, which means that all of the sides should touch. So I'm going to double click here and get this activated. I should have no gap. So this should pop up. I'm going to get rid of the gap width to 0, as close as I can. Okay, now I have no gap. You might want to change the background, the look, but for now, we'll just keep it pretty plain. Bins, I don't want it actually to say bins, because I know those are the bins, but those bins are actually about something, and what those bins are salary. All right, frequency does hold true. It might be interesting to see the data labels. So I'm going to put data labels in there, so I'm going to open this up. And I can go to data labels, and you can see the quantity for each one. So you can see this is pretty heavily right skewed, right? A lot of people making the smaller amounts, and then fewer and fewer. We have a couple outliers here, just 2 people making tons of money. Now if you want to be really clear about what the bins are, I can tell you right now what the bins are showing me is how much people make between these 2 numbers, but sometimes we want to be more explicit. So to be more explicit, we go to our frequency table, and you could say that this is, for example, I could type in up here 0 to 3,000, so you can see that value. And then right here, if I wanted to, I could type up here again that this is actually 30,000, and 1 to 2,430,000. Now this gets a little much, so I'm probably not going to do the whole way, but if you wanted to show exactly what each of the bin ranges are, you can do it this way. Or you can just do it with the knowledge that what you're seeing is everything that's up to this value from before that one right there. The one thing I do look for that I don't want to see is that word more. Okay, if there's anything in more, what that means is that I actually did not make enough bins. This bin over here was not as big as my max. So if I have something in more, it means I didn't capture all of my data. And I don't want more on my graph, so I'm just going to get rid of that. Okay, I don't need to have that right there. So you can really see that this frequency table controls everything we're seeing on this histogram. Now this histogram, we do need to give it a different title, which is like the basketball salaries. Alright, so now I'm going to finish with the directions say here. So I'm going to take this graph, I'm just going to put it up here to the top right of our data set, and underneath it I'm going to make a really quick table for finding standard deviation, mean, and by the way, also taking a second to make this look a little bit nicer. These words are way too small, so if I highlight them and go to the home, I can just change the size right here, and now you can kind of see everything a little bit better right here. I also, if I wanted to make these easier to read, I could put commas in so you can kind of see it better. It is money, so you might want to turn it into currency, but again, I'm going to get rid of the cents marks. Alright, so that's looking better. Now to find mean, just equals average, right? I'm going to go back to my data set and highlight my whole data set. And then do the same for median equals median. Go back to the top of my data set. Highlight the whole data set. And then we go equal standard deviation. So I'm going to do this for a sample. Okay. Or actually, that's not true. This was actually a full population, but we'll just keep it as a sample for now. Shift down. And I now have all these measurements. Again, I might just put them as commas so I can read better what's going on. Notice how things are spread out here. Again, I'm just going to get rid of this decimal points here. You can see that things really do get spread out from the mean. It is questionable whether we really want to use standard deviation given that it's such a skewed distribution right here. But we can see our mean and median. Not surprising, the mean is much higher than the median because that right tail pulls that mean away, those high outliers, making it get much higher than your median. You now have all the information you need to describe this. So if you could just quickly insert, you're going to go over to text box, and I'm just going to, this stuff, well, we'll put it right here. So I have a little text box. You might want to make it a little bit bigger, right about there. I'm going to give it a color so you can kind of stand out. And here, you're just going to briefly describe the distribution that you see here using the steps that we have discussed in class. And you have now kind of looked at and analyzed basketball salaries. On your own, you can now look at NFL salaries and also life expectancy. All of this data is real data, so it might be interesting, some of the things that you find. These are the skills that we have learned now. We've talked about absolute referencing, histogram, and rounding down. So you now have a new host of skills, and I hope this lab works out well for you.